Hey everyone, On the Run with Beards and Dunn is back, episode 14. Can you believe it, Beards?
Oh my gosh, Dunn, I can't believe 14, and I don't know about you. Well, I do know about you because I know you very well. We are having a ball doing this.
It's like you're sitting in the room with me here, and that's what's so much fun. It's like you said, we've always been in touch with each other, and
right.
But a month or two, it's just that's life. Sometimes a couple months go by, and you go, "Geez,
exactly."
Beards hasn't called, or I haven't called Beards."
Right.
And then, I will play phone tag for a few days.
Yeah.
And then we usually, one of us will be on the road driving somewhere, and then we'll get chatting on the phone. But
no, so this has been wonderful, and just kind of reminiscing.
Oh, it's exciting. I tell you, after every podcast, I'm either exhausted or so jacked up. In fact, I told Karen, I said, I'm going to get my bike and stuff laid out. I'm going to go for a ride because I know when we get done tonight, I'm going to be ready to go out and burn up some energy.
And Don, you live down on the coast in North Carolina, and you said what? It's in the 90s
it's
there.
Like 99 degrees. The heat index is probably like 110. I got to admit, I love it. I don't mind the heat. I take plenty of fluids, and I grew up on a dairy farm in South Dakota.
Right.
And you know about dairy farming. In the summertime, our barn was not air conditioned. We didn't have anything like our house wasn't air conditioned.
No.
And so, you get in between those cows and the heat. They're black and white. They're Holsteins. The heat just radiates off of those cows. And I tell you what, it's either survival of the fittest. You either died or you adapted. And I think I adapted.
And Dunn, is that heat wave that's been all over the country, except up here around northern Minnesota. I tell you, I had some folks out on a guide trip Sunday. We were dressed like it was October, and I'm not making this up. On the way back to town when we got done fishing, I had the heater on in my truck in mid-July.
That folks that are listening to this, do not go to Bemidji, Minnesota.
No, it's warm. It's gonna work. It's like 70 today, and then it's supposed to be like in the 80s next week. So it's warming up.
When's the ice start? About September? Or what?
Oh yeah, end of August.
Well, we usually go up there fishing with you in September, and it is awesm. It is just
great time to be here.
Well, anyway, we last week was just off the charts with London. What a great memory that you have of that, and great experience, and it was so much fun to see you doing it. And then you came back. We got to remember London was March, I think you told me 29th.
Yes.
And I remember you said in your training diary the next day you ran 6 miles. The
I
day
did.
after that, you ran 10, and then you're probably flying. You flew back to the U.S. and what was your training like then? The next, what happened? Because I'm just going to give it away. Grandma's Marathon's coming up on June 3rd. And I know you had mentioned you wanted to do Grandma's the year before, but it was the same day as your wedding.
Right.
Yeah, so you had to kind of nix it in 1980, excuse me. But now it's 1981. You just finished London, March 29th. Was Grandma's already penciled in?
It was. I had already decided I'm going to run Grandma's, and I had talked to Scott Keenan, the race director there, and told him that I was going to come and run, and he said, we'll give you a free entry, and we'll put you up at the Radisson Hotel. We'll take care of your lodging. So, that was a pretty nice little deal back then.
So, just to be totally transparent, no cash appearance.
I might have got $500.
Okay. All right, because I know after running 2:11 at London and, Houston and Beppu, it's kind of like Scott had to feel like, no, this is you're a hometown guy.
It might have been 700.
We're taking care of you.
Yeah.
I know it got a little better in future years, but we'll get into that later. So
after London done, I ran, the next day I went and did a 6-mile run, but I noticed my left calf was a little sore, and I thought, well, it's just from the cobblestone and
running a marathon.
Running a marathon, but then I did 10 miles the next day, 10 after that, then I did 15 after that, and then I went back to doubles, but my calf was still bothering me, and so I finally went to a podiatrist. But the week after, it had been the second week after London, I was back running 128 miles that week. So I kind of got right back into my training.
What did the podiatrist do for you?
Well, so I went to him because it was really starting to really bother me, and I could tell I was compensating. So at the time there was a really good podiatrist in Minneapolis named Dr. Jerry Christensen, and all the runners went to him, and so I went to him, and I'll never forget this. I went to him and he looked at it and he did some things to it and he says, I don't want you to run for a couple of days. And so I didn't run for a couple of days. I ran in the deep end of a swimming pool, put a little life belt around me. And then I went back to him 2 days later, and he did some kind of this miraculous tape job. And he says, go out and give it a shot. So I went out, I ran from his office. I did a 10-mile run, sub 6-minute pace, and my calf felt good. So I kept that tape on there until it wore off. And eventually, it just the calf healed up and it got better and then it was fine.
Kind of a strain or whatever that just needed a little time to heal. All right, very good. All right. So,
yeah.
But then, did I hear you say 128 miles like the second?
Yeah. So then, I had 128 miles a week and a half after Grandma's, and then
London, yeah.
Or London, yes. And then I had to kind of cut back a little bit and took 2 days off, so I had like 70 miles that week. And then the following week, I got right back into it. I think right around 120 miles a week, something like that, and back doing my hard stuff again.
So you're into April, mid-April, heading towards and so the weather up there is probably getting decent.
Yeah, because I looked at some of my notes that it was very slippery because we had some snow, But by that time, most of the snow was starting to melt, and things are getting a little bit nicer weather-wise and temperature-wise. So I was, able to get out and really start doing some, good hard fartlicks, even go to the track every once in a while and do some track things.
So when you talk about fartlick, and I think all the runners know, there's different ways of doing it. Some people will, maybe go, it's supposed to be just spontaneous. I'm going to go, and sometimes I know in college we'd run telephone poles.
Right.
Or something, or you just you look down the road and you see a mailbox. It might be a quarter mile.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm just going to pick it up to race pace from here to there. And then I'm going to back off and see how long. And then when I feel good, I'll pick another goal.
Right.
Some people look at their watch and do like 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute pickups and things like that. I know with, as we got into the technology, some people would even use their heart rates, to kind of judge how long they're going to go. What was any philosophy or just whatever felt good?
Well, so Don, kind of like what we did back at South Dakota State University, I'd pick a telephone pole out and run to that hard, or a tree or a house or something. But then when I got hooked up with Coach Squires, he's the one that started me doing these like 1 minute pickups with a 2 minute recovery. Okay. And the recovery wasn't just jogging. I mean, it was kind of right back to your normal pace. And then I'd pick it up for another minute. He had me doing sometimes up to 10-minute pickups at one time and at a, really fast pace. So I tell you what, that fartlick, because I didn't go to the track all that often, but that fartlick, a lot of guys, gals, you're up in that lead group and somebody throws in a surge and, after the first one, you can, first two, you can usually go with it. But Coach had me doing these all the time. So I'd throw in a surge, throw in another one, throw in another one. Well, by about the fourth one, most of the guys you're racing against are just hanging on or they've already dropped off.
I think I remember, was it Coach Squires that said, correctly, like they're in a 10K, he said there's 8 moves or something like that. Like
he was always wanting to move.
There was no you just find that one speed and hang in there as long as you can.
Right.
And so Coach was, so he was giving you some advice. It's now April heading into May.
Yep.
Any races on your schedule between London and Grandma's June 3rd?
Yeah. So I'm looking at I ran. You'll remember this, Don, on May 16th of 1981. I ran my very first 10K Pepsi Challenge in Sioux Falls.
Yes.
And I was fortunate to win that and run 29:50. You must have been right there, too, pretty close.
I was hurt. So I was.
That year you were hurt.
I was on the course cheering you on. And, I remember, you came and did that Pepsi race in 81, and you came back and did it again in 82.
And right after Boston.
And Sioux Falls was so excited. In fact, we'll talk about this in the future episodes. Yeah. I think it was your first race after Boston. After
it was.
208. So anyway, so you did Sioux Falls, a sub 30 10K, which is okay. And Sioux Falls was an easy course. Yeah.
So then a couple weeks later, Mary and I got invited to San Juan, Puerto Rico for a big 10K, and so we got there, and it's hotter than Hades down there, and so on.
I'm from Minnesota.
Yeah, so the race was on May 25th. It started at 5:00 in the afternoon.
Oh my gosh!
It was 92 degrees at the start with high humidity and rain. And I was fortunate to win it. I ran 29:42 that day in the heat.
Oh my gosh!
So I was pretty tickled.
Was it pretty competitive? Did you have anybody near you?
I tell you what. So coming off of London, and running's very big down in Puerto Rico, and so they thought I was like an Olympic champion or something. So everybody, all the top guns in Puerto Rico were there gunning for me, and I tell you, there was about 4 or 5 of us with about a little over a mile to go, and then I,
was able to go.
I decided to put the hammer down a little bit and see if I could break the pack up, and I was fortunate to do that.
Now this sounds like if that was like May 25th and Grandma's is June 3rd is about.
No, Grandma's was later than that done.
Are you sure? 1981?
Yeah. Yep, Grandma's was on June 20th.
That long? I thought it was early June.
Nope, June. It's always the third Saturday in June.
All right, I stand corrected.
Yeah.
So you had time. So that was towards the end of May.
Right.
And now you weren't rest. You didn't rest for Sioux Falls. You didn't rest for
No.
You were training through them.
I was training through them to get ready for Grandma's. So everything, all the couple of races I ran after London, exactly. I kind of ran through them as far as I didn't really taper down like I would normally for a race, and kind of more using it as just a good hard speed effort, and to get ready for Grandma's.
We always said there's no training like a race. I mean, you never push yourself in training like you can in a race, and I'm just excited. I kind of remembered you. You came to Sioux Falls just to come see us, I'm sure, and it just happened to be the weekend of a 10K, and you jumped in.
Well, and done. I look a couple of weeks after Sioux Falls, I ran on the 30th of May. I ran a half marathon in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Mike Slack was in it.
Right.
And I was fortunate. I won that race and ran 104.15 on a hilly course.
I remember seeing a photo. I think you have it at your house of you and you guys are like in perfect synchronization.
Yes, I love that picture.
And Mike Slack, it was a sub-4 minute
what a
miler.
stud.
It was outstanding. And for you and it was Excelsior. It was around that area, Minnetonka and stuff. And that was, so Beards, you're coming off of London. You're back into on the horse, in the saddle,
right?
Whatever you want to say. You're training your butt off. You're racing. You and I love racing.
Me too.
In 1982, we'll talk about it later, I think I did like 18 or 20 road races in like 6-month period because that was the cherry on the top of the cake. The training was great. I love training. But really, what were you training for?
Well, that's it,
race,
and done.
And
you kind of you did that a lot too, where you didn't really taper down for a lot of those races. You just use them as kind of a good hard workout.
Well, because Jay Dirksen, that was his philosophy. He wanted you ready. You picked your target, and that's what you were training towards. Everything else along there was just a stepping stone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so.
And now the kids nowadays, though, they hardly race at all anymore.
I know. Those youngsters nowadays don't know. It sounds like a couple old geezers.
Yeah,
no
kidding.
Good old days when we used to race every weekend.
Right.
Well, anyway, that half marathon was what, the end of May?
So
June?
the half marathon was May 30th.
All right.
Grandma's
so
was
you got 3 weeks.
June 20th.
Yep. So you got 3 weeks. Anything else between June 1st and June 20th? Just
no.
training?
So that the week after I ran that half marathon, I ran 140 miles that week.
Wow.
And then 2 weeks out. So Coach Squires had me do a workout. Most people do their last, real long, like a 20-miler, like a couple weeks
2
out.
Weeks out, yeah.
Yeah, Coach always had me do mine about 12 days out. So he had me set up a course, and so here's what he wanted me to do. I ran the first 5 miles at a little under 5-minute pace.
Oh, Lord. This is
then
training.
And then the next 5 miles at about 5:20 pace. He wanted me to back it off a little bit. Okay. Then the third 5 at 5:10 pace, and then the fourth 5-mile stretch at about 5:20 pace, and then he wanted me to run the last mile hard, and I ran the 21st mile in like 4:50. So I ran 1:45 that day for a 21 miler.
So not to
or
do the
20
math,
miler.
It's pretty much a 2:16 marathon if you would have just
Even a little quicker than that.
2:50,
Yeah.
So it sounded like race simulation as close
It
without
was.
going into the
And
well.
so done. So that night, after my last long run, I was so excited. So I called Coach Squires up on the phone, and I tell him, and he starts screaming at me on the phone. I mean, if he could have put his hand through the phone and grabbed my neck, he would have. He says, "Oh, Dickie, you blew it. You left it all out on a training run, blah blah blah." And then I'm not saying a word. And then all of a sudden, Coach goes, "Dickie, just calm down. Just calm down." And I'm thinking, me calm down? And so he said, "No, you'll be fine. You recover quick." So I think he didn't want me start having doubts that, I might have left it out on the training course.
And did he, I hate to say, I don't know, underestimate? So when you were doing those, sub 5 for the first 5:20, you're like, this feels pretty good.
Done. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you know me, I'm not a boaster or bragger.
No.
But honest to gosh, when I was supposed to run a little bit slower than 5-minute pace, but it felt, honest to goodness, it felt so gosh dang easy. And I mean, and when I cut it back the second 5, that 5:20 pace, it felt like I was walking.
I love it. For people listening to this isn't normal. This isn't your normal runner. This is those guys at the top 1/10 of 1% that can kind of do this. You're coming off a 140-mile week, and
and
your legs are feeling that. I hate to use the word fresh. I don't think fresh is the right word, but good.
They felt good, and and I did this workout all by myself, and so that gave me a lot of confidence too.
Okay, so now it's 10 days before Grandma's. You just did this pretty amazing workout. You started your taper, I would have to assume.
So the week before Grandma's, I did 111 miles, and then the week of Grandma's, so on the Sunday before, I did a 12-miler and a 4-miler in the afternoon, 9 and 5, 8 and 5, 7-5, 7 and 2, and then on the day before, I just went out and ran about 4.5 miles, just real easy and stuff.
Just for the nerves.
Yeah.
So, Beards, kind of going back, I don't remember. It's too long ago. Were you still putting in some part-time work at BJ's? Or did you give that up? Or did it just like if they called you, you might have went in, but do you remember?
I don't remember for sure. I think at that point, I might have been a little bit, very little.
A couple days a week?
Because,
I don't know.
yeah, and at that point, I had signed a deal with New Balance where, I was making, like $12,000 a year or something, which was a lot of money back then.
When did that, because you started off, I think it was like $500 a month, and you guys were so tickled because that basically kind of paid the rent.
Right.
And then after Houston, Beppu, London, did they renegotiate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then they bumped it up to $1,000 a month.
Wow.
And I was tickled
so now
pink.
You're not only paying the rent, you're paying the electric and groceries.
Right.
I mean,
yeah,
you're living high on the.
No, but we're not having to look underneath cushions and stuff for nickels, dimes, and quarters to put more milk in the fridge.
And obviously, this guy don't. But everybody knows your anything you need running wise is provided.
Yeah, New Balance. I tell you,
shoes,
they were
warm up, Gore-Tex stuff. I don't
shoes, know. All my running gear, and they're one of the first companies to come out with a Gore-Tex suit and all that stuff. I mean, honest to gosh, Don, I thought I was living having a dream or something. It was just almost too good to be true.
We were living it with you, bud. Trust me, we were all
right.
Just kind of waiting on every race result. All right, so you and Mary headed up to Duluth. Day or two before?
Here's what happened. Mary had to work, so I had to leave on Thursday to get up there for like a little press conference or something. So, you remember that white Honda we have?
3-speed on the floor.
Yeah, it was about the size of a Matchbox car.
You and I drove that to Kansas City one time.
Yes. And so Mary had to work. She was working, I think, at a bank. And so I had to leave that morning. So I remember and she was going to ride up with my parents or something, I think, on the next day. So I remember grabbing the mail out of the post box, and a couple of my bags, and so I threw the bags in the back seat. And I throw the mail over on the passenger side. So at this point now, all I can, Grandma's Marathon has overtaken my mind. So I get out of Minneapolis. I'm driving north on Interstate 35, heading to Duluth. And all I can think about is Grandma's Marathon. I thought, I got to get my head off, my mind off of this.
Too early.
So I looked over, and one of my Track and Field News running magazine had come. So I thought, well, I'll just read that while I'm driving up to Duluth.
Okay.
So I grab the magazine. I flip it open, not to any particular page, and it big bold headlines. John Graham of England runs 2 hours, 9 minutes, 48 seconds at the Rotterdam Marathon, which at the time, that was like one of the best times ever run in the world.
I think Derek Clayton had run 2:08:33. He had also run like a 2:09 low 30s. So he had like to the two fastest ever. That dude might have been, the Soul Brothers had run a 2:09, one of them.
Right.
And then now this one. I mean, there's only a handful of guys that have ever broke 2:10.
Right.
Bill Rogers had done it a couple times. Okay.
So I read the article, and I thought, well, I guess I better put, the magazine down, and so I get safely to Duluth. So between these two little towns along the interstate, north of Minneapolis, between Willow River and Moose Lake, Minnesota, you know how they have mile markers along the interstate? The first mile marker that I see is mile marker number 209. So now, I'm always one, as you know, Don, I wake up in the morning always looking for positive things to enhance my day.
Sure.
So my goofy little brain's thinking, holy cow, wait a minute here. You flip open this magazine to not any particular page, and this 209 pops out at you. The first mile marker I see is mile marker number 209. So I'm thinking, am I going to run a 209 on Saturday? Now,
your best is 2:11.
Right.
Okay.
So almost 2:12. So you think, well, that's only, 2:12 to 2:09. That's only 3 minutes. But 3 minutes at that end of the spectrum is a lot. So anyhow, I pull into downtown Duluth about 2:00 in the afternoon, and I'm staying at the Radisson Hotel. So I grab my bags and I go up to the front desk, and I go, yes, ma'am. Do you have a room for Dick Beardsley? Oh, yeah, you betcha, Mr. Beardsley. And she walked in the back room and comes out and hands me a packet and hands me my key. Now, this is before they had key cards. They gave you a key, So I walk around.
Keep going.
Yeah. So I walk around to the elevators. Of course, 2:00 in the afternoon, nobody's really checking in yet. And the elevator doors are wide open. So I step onto the elevator doors, and they shut. And I thought, I guess I better look and see what room I'm in. And I look at my key,
209.
And I start jumping up and down like a kid that got a brand new train set for Christmas. What room do you think I had?
209.
Not even close.
What?
It was room 902, but backwards, that's 209. and done. I didn't know if I was going to win the race on Saturday, but I didn't tell a soul this. But in my mind, there was no doubt I was going to run a 209 marathon on Saturday.
All right. Well,
yeah.
And I wonder if you do. Well, we're going to. All right. So you get up. All right. So this is Thursday. You get up, you settle down. You had some pre-race stuff you had to commit to?
Yeah, but, a couple little news conferences, things like that. I remember Friday night, it was pouring rain. I remember going outside. I just had, remember how I used to get before a big race? I just didn't want to talk to anybody. And so I'm out doing a little walk underneath an overhang so I wouldn't get wet outside the Radisson Hotel. And so I get back up to my room, and I always, when Mary and I would go to these races, I always had a room with two beds, because we'd sleep in one. And then, I knew I wasn't going to sleep very well. The nerves and the excitement, and I'm getting up, it seemed like every half an hour going to the bathroom and whatnot. But I always wanted my race uniform to get a good night's sleep. So I would pull back the sheets on the empty bed, and I'd put my racing singlet about where I would be laying. I'd put my shorts down where my butt would be, my socks down at the end of the bed along with my shoes. and I'd cover it up, knowing that, well, I might not get a very good sleep tonight, but my racing outfit's
going to be ready to go. It's not going to hold you back.
I mean, people are going to think, well, they know I'm kind of goofy anyhow,
no,
but...
but you're getting into it's a psychological thing. Now, hey, just not to... You carbo loading, pumping the fluids. I mean, it's the day, 24 hours before the race.
Right.
Do you have a routine or anything you try to do, or just?
Not really. My mom would make me banana bread the week of, a couple loaves. I love banana bread, and the bananas, of course, high in potassium and help prevent cramps in your legs. So I ate a lot of bananas, and then pretty much all week long, I was eating some kind of pasta every day.
So you're carbo loading, but you don't do the depletion.
No,
and put yourself
no.
through all that.
I never did the depletion. I think if I did, I'd blow away like a gosh dang
you couldn't
twig.
afford to not
No.
eat for very long.
So, New Balance had sent me a brand new racing suit and, singlet and shorts and a brand new pair of racing shoes and they wanted me to wear this new singlet because the name New Balance was a lot bigger on the front. Well, I always took 2 pair of racing stuff with me, shoes, everything, because the last thing you want to do is wake up in your racing shoes. You forgot them. And I wear a size 9, and now I have to wear a guy's size 12 because that's all there's available. So I had my new uniform all laid out in the bed there, so I could get a good night's rest. And I had my old uniform, and I was pretty superstitious. If I wore the same singlet and shorts, socks, and shoes all the time. Well, I had them stuffed up in a duffel bag up in the closet. So I get up the next morning, I'm excited and Mary's excited and I got my stuff on and she walks out the doors to go downstairs to get our ride out to the start. And I go out the door and it closes behind me and all of a sudden it hit me. I thought, I got to go back in the room. So I said, Mary, I'll meet you downstairs. So I went back in the room and I felt so guilty that I had this uniform I'd won the London Marathon with and all these other races. I had it stuffed in a bag up in the corner of the closet. It'd be like you and me being best friends, and then another guy moves into the neighborhood
and you won't return my calls anymore.
Yeah, and has a nicer train set, and you forget about your good buddy that's been there with you the whole time. So I thought, well, I can't do this. So I took my old racing stuff out, and I hung the singlet on a hanger. I pinned my old racing shorts to the singlet, and I pinned my old racing socks to the shorts, and I tied my old racing shoes to the socks, and my room looked right out onto the 25-mile mark, and I hung my old uniform in the window so it could see me as I ran by.
Oh, it was cheering for you, Beards. You had your old uniform supporting you.
It was. So, anyhow,
oh, Lord.
So we finally get up to the start, and it is the most perfect day to run a marathon. It's about 48 degrees at the start, 48 degrees at the finish, and no wind. And it was cloudy and some fog and mist rolling in off of Lake Superior, and a guy named Gary Bjorklund. Right. Now, Gary, we called him BJ. He was, in my opinion, one of the greatest distance runners to ever come out of Minnesota. And he had won the Grandma's Marathon the year before and ran 2:10:20. Yeah. So the race starts, and him and I, we bolt out of the starting area, and I get about a quarter mile down the road, him and I running together. And I had a terrible habit back then, and I looked back, and the fog was so thick, I could not see any of the other 7,000 runners.
Yeah, right.
And so BJ turns to me. He goes, Beards. He goes, hey, it's just you and me, buddy, but it's your race. He says, I'm going to do everything I can to help you out, but it's your race. Well, my first thought is, wait now, he's an Olympian. He's from the Duluth area. He's a defending champion, course record. My first thought is he's setting me up for the kill somewhere down the road. Yeah. So at about 4.5 miles, I get a terrible stitch in my left side, and I'm trying not to let BJ see it because I'm thinking if I do, he'll take off on me. And I'm trying to rub it. And finally, it got so bad, I turned to him. I said, BJ, I got a terrible stitch. He goes, Beards, no problem. We'll back off the pace a little bit. And at 5 miles, there's an aid station. Get a drink of water. You'll be fine. So we backed off the pace a little bit. I get a cup of water at the 5 mile mark. Boom, stitch is gone. I'm thinking, man, this BJ is a pretty good guy. So we're running along. Now, this is how naive I was. Now remember, when they measure a course, they measure it
the shortest distance,
the tangents.
Right.
Well, I either forgot or I didn't know that. So I'm running right down the middle of the highway, this old highway that was closed off. Well, BJ's cutting every corner. He runs out to where I'm at about 10K into the race. He goes, Beards, what in the tarnation are you doing running out in the middle of the road all the time? And I remember turning to him, I go, BJ, I go, what the heck are you doing? I said, you're cheating. You're cutting the corners. And his exact words to me were, Beards, you big cob of corn. he says, they measure it the shortest way you can run it. So I go, oh, okay. So now I start cutting the corners. So we come through the halfway point, 13.1 miles, and 104 and like 39 or 40. And BJ turns to me, he says, Beards, you got a 209 going. And I remember I started chuckling a little bit. I said, well, how about can we just stop right now and double our time, you know? So, and now you got to remember this. This up through about 15 miles, we're running, sub 5 minute pace.
Right.
But him and I are kind of talking quite a bit to each other. Well, at 15 miles, the talking pretty much quit.
Okay.
Yeah, no more chit-chatting. So we're going along. Well, at about a little after 18 miles, it's when you get off the old highway and pretty soon you come into the city limits of Duluth where the crowds get really, really big. Well, once again, I turn back over my shoulder to see if anybody's coming. Of course, I didn't see anybody, and when I turned back around, BJ was like 30 yards in front of me, and he's flying. And I'm thinking, that son of a gun, he was setting me up. He wanted to run together until we got into the city limits where the crowds are big. He's a local boy. They're going to be cheering for him, so I take off. But I don't catch him until the 19-mile mark. Ooh. So I thought, okay, I gotta make this guy hurt. So I put the hammer down. I throw in this hard surge, and I get to the 20-mile point, and a volunteer on a bike comes up. He goes, Beards, you just ran a 4:41 mile, but BJ's like less than 10 yards back. So I remember turning around. I could still see the color of his eyes. So I thought, man, I gotta really put the hammer down. So I put the hammer down. And I get to the 21-mile mark, and the guy on the bike comes up. He goes, Beards, you just ran a 4:36 mile, and BJ's hurting. And I'm thinking, BJ's hurting? I think I'm going to have a heart attack at this point.
I got to stop you, Beards. You're one of the nicest guys I've ever met in my life. You give you the shirt off your back, but in a race, it's a freaking knife fight. But
it is.
I tell you, when you stick the knife in, I mean, I've ran races with you, and I've always thought, well, hey, I'm going to hang. Geez, I'm running with Dick. Maybe we can just run together. The next thing I know, Beards throws in a freaking surge, drops me like a bad habit. He crosses the finish line. I come in eventually, and he's, oh, Mike, you did great. Pat me on the back and stuff. And so when people are listening to this, I am not kidding you. When he says, I'm going to make this guy hurt, and now I'm going to put in a move, that's called racing.
Right.
And that's called competitive instinct. And you definitely had it. Wasn't Lemon Drop Hill? Where's that at on the course?
So that's coming up.
Oh, okay.
So I look back and I could see BJ's arms are kind of hanging and stuff, and
he's hurting.
And I could tell he was hurting, but I was hurting too. So I backed it off a little bit, and then just after 22 miles, you come up what is called Lemon Drop Hill. Now, it's still a pretty good hill, but back in the day, it was quite a hill because the bypass around the city of Duluth hadn't been put in yet. So it was a double hill. So you go up the hill, crest it, then go up another hill. So I get to the top of the second hill, and I start coming down the backside, a nice gradual downhill, and I looked at my little Casio watch, and the battery had gone dead.
Oh my God, it's blank?
It's blank.
You don't, okay.
Now, so this is back in the day before we had a pace car or anything like that. So now you got to remember this. It's the first time I'd run Grandma's. I'm not even sure where I'm at on the course, and my watch isn't working.
Okay.
And the fog is getting thicker and thicker. So I finally get down off of this gradual downhill where it flattened out a little bit, and that gosh dang stitch came back. And it is worse than it was,
No, where are
you
we
know,
at
the
race?
5 mile point.
23?
I'm
24?
somewhere about 23 and a half
Okay.
miles, something like that. So I start rubbing my side, and I look back, and nobody was around, so I start grunting. I start grunting like a bear, like going, and I'm pursing my lips and blowing air through it, trying to get to go away. And I thought, oh my gosh. I mean, I'm still running at a pretty good clip, but my inclination was, oh my gosh, the whole field's gonna come by me. But then I started talking to myself, and I remember saying to myself, okay, if you can get to the Radisson Hotel, because you make a sharp left-hand turn there, and at that point it's 1 mile to go. And I remember telling myself, if you can get there in first place, nobody, I don't care how bad of a stitch you have, is going to beat
You're
you.
going to gut it
Now,
out, yeah.
Again, I was telling myself this, So as I'm moving, block after block, and I'm straining my eyes through the thick fog, trying to see this tall Radisson Hotel. Finally, I can barely see it through the fog, and now it's getting a little bit closer and a little bit clearer, and now I can see the corner where I'm going to turn.
Well, you're still
up
feeling
ahead.
the stitch.
You still
It's not
got the
help-
bad
okay.
stitch. And so now I'm about probably 60 yards from the turn. Now, back in the day there, that was on Superior Street. They only closed off one half of the road. So the other half had all this traffic and stuff in it. So as I'm coming towards that corner, I noticed there's a little kid right in the middle of the street I'm running on at the corner playing with his little Tonka toy truck. So I'm thinking, surely the mom and dad are going to get the little fella out of the way. So now I'm about 40 yards out, and the little kid's still hanging there. Now, even though I've got a stitch, I'm, moving at a pretty good clip. So I start yelling, the kid, and I'm waving my hand, get the kid out of the way. Nothing happens. Now I'm like 20 yards from the kid. Now it's down to 15. All of a sudden, that little kid, he picks up his truck and he starts hoofing across towards the street with all the people on. And now I'm less than 10 yards from the kid, and he stops in the middle of the road, looks at me, and he freezes. At this point, I'm thinking, what am I going to do? If I go to my right, I'm going to run into the traffic. If I go to my left, I'm going to run into the lamppost in the crowd, or do I take the kid out? At that point, my only option was to take the kid out. So I ran smack dab into that little kid. He went flying off into the crowd on the side of the street. I remember looking back, and I heard him crying. I'm thinking, well, that's good. It means he's still breathing anyhow. But I tell you what, Don, it made my stitch go away.
Probably the yelling or something.
Oh, I don't know, or hit
Well,
the
it
kid.
distracted you so much. Yeah.
And so I make that left-hand turn, and then there's a bunch of turns, and then I still remember coming around the last turn into this long straightaway. And the crowd is huge. People are screaming and yelling, and they're going, you're going to break 210. And I'm thinking, what are they talking about?
Right.
And as I got closer, I could see the clock reading 209 something. I'm thinking, did Scott Keenan, the race director, forget to start the clock?
That's wrong. Yeah.
But I come across the finish line, and the clock stopped at 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 36 seconds.
They rounded it up to 37 Beards.
They did, yeah. It was like 209:36.6 or something like that. Wow. And I remember I was jumping up and down, like a little kid that just won $1 million, and my mom and dad were inside the finish chute. And my dad, who you could have hit over the head with a 2x4, and wouldn't cry. Man, my dad's crying, my mom's crying. I'm going to start crying right now.
I love it.
And it was just such an emotional, unbelievable experience.
And, if you come to our extras on our website, the beardsanddunpod.com, I've got some photos I found from Grandma's 81. You and BJ, you're sharing a cup of water. Unlike Depp Who, they don't care if you guys share water in Duluth. No disqualifications for sharing a cup of water. And there's that finish line shot. It is a classic shot, Beards, of you with your arms in the air, the biggest goddamn smile on your face.
Oh.
And, it's a classic. It's a great shot. And
well done. Yeah. Going into the race, I knew I was in the best shape of my life. But when I was only 9 seconds off of Bill Rogers' American record that day.
Missed it by 10. I remember reviewing the results and thinking immediately, because I knew Rogers had ran 2:09.26 at when he beat
27
at he beat Seiko in Boston in 79.
Right.
Yeah. And I thought, man, Beards, 10 more seconds, you'd have the American record, the fastest time ever by an American.
I know.
Okay, you're number two.
I know.
At that point.
But done. It was
surreal.
It was so far beyond. Yeah. I mean, 209 wasn't even in my thought at the time. But again, you go in there trying to be competitive, But I tell you what, this is how great of a coach Coach Squires was. And unfortunately, it was about a year ago now. I was out at his funeral. He died at just missed hitting the age of 90. But when he sent me a letter before Grandma's with another envelope inside that letter and said, don't open this until after the race. Right. So I get back to my room after meeting with the media people and all those folks, and I opened up that envelope, and inside it was just a few words. It said, Dickie, you're going to run between 209 and 210. And I ran 209.37. He nailed it. And that's from a coach that is coaching me by telephone and on beer-stained napkins from the Elliott Lounge. I mean, that's how great of a coach he is.
When you think about the people he had worked with Salazar, Rogers, Greg Meyer, I mean, the guy, he knew what he was talking about.
He knew his stuff.
And he knew you.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Beards, I got to stop.
I know. I'm worn out.
I tell you, I just ran Grandma's again. That is fantastic, and this is just off the charts. When you think about, I keep coming back to it. May of 1980, you went to the Olympic trials thinking, one more marathon so I can tell my grandkids I did it. I qualified and ran in an Olympic trials. And here you are, basically 13 months later. This is now your 13th consecutive personal best, which set the Guinness Book of World Records, which I know for males, I think it still stands to this day.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it is. And so in that 1 year period, you went from
I went from
one of us guys to one of the best in the world.
I hadn't broken 220 before I ran the Olympic trials in May of 1980. And then, like you said, a year later, I mean, I've been very blessed, as you know, with many things in my life, but especially with my running.
It's a fantastic story. It's almost beyond belief, but it's not, because it's real. We were there. We saw it. Hopefully a few hundred years from now, somebody will log on to this podcast and go, that couldn't have happened.
I know.
Like that.
Well, and I appreciate you letting me talk about that race, because
Beards, I'd listen to that over and over. I'll probably replay this several times after we put it up on the
internet. It gets me fired up too, and we want to thank all the folks for listening today, and we hope you enjoyed it as much as Dunn and I have done. If you have any questions for Dunn and myself or comments about the show, please contact us directly on our website at beardsanddunpod.com, or you can leave us a comment on our Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, all at Beards and Dun Pod.
Of course, YouTube, if you're seeing it there, hit the like, subscribe, whatever. And I have had several people that don't know you, and they just know me from meeting me here in New Bern, and mostly through cycling. And some of them, just because I mentioned it to them, they've been listening to it. And, I want to encourage anybody, if you like what you're hearing and you think other people would, I'm going to ask you, hit the share button on Facebook.
Yes.
Or send some friends an email and say, this may be something you like. And a lot of people tell us they listen to it either when they're working out or they're in the car. And they just, it's something to kind of get them through a period of time and kind of fire them up a little bit and have a good laugh while you're doing it.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Beards, have a great day. I can't wait to, next week we're going to talk about post-grandmas, because I just can't even imagine what your life kind of turned into, but you can tell us.
Right.
And then, gee, you're going to take a big, long break, aren't you? No.
We'll find out next week.
Exactly. There's another marathon on the horizon, and we'll talk about it next
Done.
time.
Always good talking to you, buddy.
See you,
Have
bud.
a good bike ride tonight.
Yeah, I'm going right now. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.